Do you ever look at all the old FPV stuff you've got laying around and think, I could probably build a whole freaking drone from some of this? I did. I went through my office and I found a bunch of old stuff laying around, enough of it to actually build a drone. Not just any drone. The frame that I found and the motors that I found are for a 10-inch build. We're going to build a 10-inch drone. And if you're thinking, oh, this is great, I'm going to follow along. Bardwell, give me those sweet affiliate links to all the products you're using. No. Some of this stuff you could go out and buy. Some of it's really good stuff, like this Hobbywing ESC. That's a fantastic ESC. But some of it, I have no idea where this frame come from. It is, it looks like a Lumineer frame. It's like a QAVX, but it's a 10-inch. I have no idea where that came from. And for video transmitter, I'm using this Cadex Polar Vista, which you can't even get anymore. So really, this is not a how-to that you're going to follow along. It's just, hey, I like building drones. You like watching me build drones. Let's go through this together. Put me on in the background or something, or maybe you'll learn something today. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You might learn something today. Now, I do confess that this is only 8-inch props, not 10-inch props, because I didn't have any 10-inch props handy. So, let's see how she flies. Oh, we got some shake. We got some shudder. That's weird. These are brand new props. That doesn't seem right. Oh, wow. That's a lot of shaking. Something about a 10-inch, like even though these are not 10-inch props, this still flies like a big frame. Because it's the size of the frame more than the, it just feels big. Maybe it's just because the rates are low. Maybe it's because I've got 533 race rates on here. I didn't think like snappy 1200 degrees per second would be a good idea. Yeah, buddy. That shutter's no good. I don't like that shutter at all. Ooh, big drop out there. Ooh, that was exciting. It's because I'm all the way back here behind the hill. You know. Yeah, how about inverted yaw spin? Not much yaw on this SOB. Oh, a little bit of yaw. Maybe there's some expo on it. Huh. Interesting. You don't go full yaw very often with a racing drone. I don't. It's fun to fly these big drones, bigger drones. It's fun to fly them. They got this kind of floaty quality. Not a lot of up tilt. I could do with more up tilt. Wow, that is horrible. It's this frame. That's the big floppy arms of this frame with no reinforcement. That's my theory as to what's doing that shaking. I mean, they're thick, but yeah, you just can't have big, long, unsupported arms and not pay a price. Doesn't matter, because you could not buy this frame if you wanted to. I don't think this frame exists. So it's not like I'm doing a review. I'm just commenting. Oh, shit. That was fun. Oh, wow. Yeah, not a lot of up tilt on this. Can you do something? Alrighty, I'm gonna bring it in 3.83. I'm gonna bring it in with the battery close to storage. That's fun. I really wish I had 10-inch props, but I don't. Let's go inside and let's learn more about this drone and build it. So, like any build, we're going to go through the parts that I'm going to use, and some of these parts maybe, I don't think it's going to be a bad build, but you might want to or not follow them directly. The frame is this. I don't know what that frame is. If you're looking for a 10-inch frame, I think the GEP-RC Mark V, I think GEP-RC has a 10-inch frame that I've heard good things about. There's other ones out there. The frame is pretty universal. The motors are Brother Hobby 3115 900 kV. These are motors you can get today, and they're good. They're good 10-inch motors. The ESC is a Hobbywing 65 amp 4-in-1. This is a fantastic ESC, as close to bulletproof as an ESC can get, and has been for years. The flight controller is the Maytech H743 Slim. This is a fantastic flight controller, but I'm pretty sure they stopped making it. And just for kicks, we're going to put TBS Crossfire on there instead of Express LRS, because why not? And this, there's a funny story behind this. 5 years ago, more or less, there was a rumor that there was going to be an interruption in supply of Caddx Vistas. And the rumor turned out to be true. There was about a 6 months period where you couldn't get Caddx Vistas. And I was like, oh, I have to stock up. I bought like 6 of them. I kind of joked about it and bragged about it on a live stream once, held up my handful of them, was like, ha. And as always, when you stock up, years later, you're digging around your basement, you go, oh, look, canned beans from 2015 that I never ate. Good thing I stocked up. Well, this is the last of those. So, just for old time's sake, we're going to put that in. It'll still work with my G2s. See, I told you. You're not going to follow this build. We're just going to have fun building it together. Let's do it. And one of the best things about a frame like this, Luminaire, is figuring out how the damn thing goes together. I mean, I've built a lot of frames, so I'm sure I can figure it out. I like to start... Oh, God. It's just a bunch of loose screws. I like to start by organizing the hardware. And I'm so excited because I just printed this tray, this work tray. I just printed this. Neither of these is my original design. This tray I got from somewhere else, and this screw gauge I had got from somewhere else. But I mashed them together in Tinkercad, and I'm super proud of the result. I'm very, very happy. These foam feet can go. I never use those. And this battery pad can go. I will always use grippy battery pad over the factory battery pad. So that's trash. And now we're gonna, if you want this tray, I will upload it to Thingiverse or Printables or wherever I decide to upload it. I'll put a link in the video description where you can upload it, where you can get it if you want to print it yourself. I'm so happy right now. This is making my whole day. I freaking love this little toy. I'm going to take a picture. These are the camera plates. We will not be using them. I know from experience that these QAV frames are sized for a 22 millimeter camera. We have a 19 millimeter camera. You need an adapter. I'm just going to go with a 3D print so they can go. And this little X piece goes in between the arms, but it's a pain in the ass to get it in there. It like fits in the end of the arm like that. But it's a pain in the ass to get it in there, and it makes it hard to replace the arms if you have to. So we're going to skip that, and we'll start with this bottom plate. Whenever you've got a bottom plate with press nuts, you always put the screws in from the far side so that it pulls the press nut down into the plate. If you put the screws in this way, it'll just pull the press nut out. We can actually do that with this middle press nut that we're not going to use because we're not using the little X piece. See, if we put the screw in like that, then that'll just pull out. We don't want that. Yeah, these screw holes are going to line up here with these press nuts. And the question is, what length of arm do we need? What length of screw do we need? I'm going to guess it's these 14s. Let's find out if I'm right. Yeah, so good. So good that they clean that carbon when that comes off the... No, of course they don't. Why would they? It seems like that's probably the length of screw they intend for us to use. I usually don't like my screws to be very far out of the press nut. You can see it's going to stick up by maybe 1 millimeter. That's acceptable. I like them to be flush, so I would probably use 12s if I were like the inventor of this frame. But there's nothing wrong with using the 14s. Oh, I know why. Yes. Of course, it's these. We're supposed to put these washers on. I bet that's it. Yeah, that gets us a little closer. And whenever I'm doing a build like this, where I'm sandwiching the arms like this, I'll always just leave these initial screws loose until I get all the arms in, and then I'll tighten them down. I also should be using Loctite. I should be using Loctite if I really cared. I would Loctite these screws with blue Loctite, but I kind of don't care. This is just kind of a throwaway build. I'm having a good time, so I'm just not going to bother. All right, we got 6 of the 8 arm screws. Actually, there's more than 8. We got 6 screws in. They're all in the press nuts, and they're not protruding an excessive amount. It's fine. Then we're going to get the last 2 screws in here. These screws do not have press nuts because they go into the into standoffs, and presumably that's what these longer 16 millimeter screws are for. I gotta say, it's fun when you're building a frame that doesn't have, like, I mean, maybe there's instructions for this frame out here somewhere, I don't know. But it's fun when you're building a frame that doesn't have instructions, kind of guessing which screw lengths go where. And I find that the number of screws of each size that they give you, like if they give me 16 8mm screws, chances are that, well, it could be for the motors. The motors have 4 screws apiece. There are 4 motors. That could be 16 screws. It could be 16 4 or 6mm screws for the top plate, right? But if they give me 2 16mm screws, and then a whole bunch of 12mm screws, it's like, well, where are those 2 supposed to go? And here in this case, crap, I'm supposed to put washers on them. Here in this case, it's a fairly good guess that these are for the standoffs, because you want more, you want the screw to go into the standoff more so that it can really bite on those threads. Whereas with a press nut, once you've gone through the press nut, there's no benefit to having any more threads. There's nothing for them to bite onto. When you're installing a screw into a standoff, is it better to have a longer screw? I mean, this is an aluminum standoff. This is a steel screw. And you could make the argument that a longer screw will have more threads into the aluminum. It'll reinforce the aluminum, and it will be less likely to bend or tear out. And that's all true. Longer screws add a little bit of weight. But I think especially when you're, and the screws do add up to a substantial amount of weight. Like on a 5-inch build or a 3-inch build, they can. But on a 10-inch build, I don't think the difference in weight is going to be that noticeable. I'm going to go with what the manufacturer provided because I am being very lazy today and just sort of banging out a build for the fun of it. I'll take this and test fly it. Sure, why not? We'll fly it by the end of the video, just so you can see what this 10-inch flies like. But yeah, I might choose longer screws. I highly recommend that you pick up a M3 and M2 screw assortment of various lengths. In fact, I'll put a link in the video description. I've just got like these assortments here. This is the exact one. It's got a combination of pan head and button head, depending on what you want, and it goes from 6mm to 20mm. I usually will also have some like 25, 30, and 35mm that I'll just buy in bags of 100. Those are for stack screws, and then also 4mm are sometimes used, and they often have to be bought separately. So yeah, I'll put some links down below to where you can pick that up. I guess the next thing I'll do is install the remaining standoffs. I like to have the standoffs already installed when I mount the flight controller and the ESC, because sometimes the wiring, especially the XT60 wiring, will be affected by exactly where the standoffs are. And as far as which screw to use, I can see that I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws, and presumably that's these right here. Also, I've just noticed that there's a screw hole here in the arms that does not have a screw in it. So we're just going to figure out the right length of screw there. Is it these? Do those? Oh, presumably these will also get a washer. Is it these 12s? Let's find out. Only one way to find out, and that's just to screw it in. I think that's going to be too long. Oh, no. No, it isn't. Is it? No, that's too long. See, that sticks out too far. Okay, well, let's find a shorter one. Oh, hang on. Yes, yes, yes. Yep, see, there are 4 of these. That's got to be it. We have 4 screw holes. We have 4 screws of approximately the right length. That's got to be it. No, see, that's not fully inserted. It is biting the threads, but these press nuts are really easy to strip if you go too hard on them. I think we just don't have the correct length of screw for these screws. How could that be? Surely the frame comes with the correct length of screws. Haha, you sweet summer child. So how long is this screw? Now this is the part where I'm really excited that I put a screw gauge on the side of this. This is a 10. Well, what were these? These were 16s, not 12s. You can see that the 10 is exactly flush with the end of the press nut. That's what I look for. We have full engagement with all of the threads with no additional screw sticking out to get somewhere where it doesn't need to be. Next, we're going to do the motors. And the motors do come with screws. One of the things I'll always do is I will put the motor nut on the motor shaft so it doesn't get lost. And then, are these screws going to be the right length for this build? Debatable. Let's compare it to the height of the motor base. No. See, again, I want the screw to fully insert into the motor base. We're not going to get full insertion. So these screws, we can save them as spares or we can throw them out, but they're not going to be any good for us. I think we're going to need more 10s. See, again, that's what we want to see. The screw is exactly the right length to fit the base. I'm going to go ahead and install these 4 motors off camera because it's going to take me a minute and it's not going to be that exciting. Next, we've got to get the flight controller and the ESC to talk to each other. And since they're not from the same manufacturer, this is a Hobbywing ESC and this is a Maytech flight controller, they do not have a compatible pinout. Fortunately, the Maytech flight controller comes with this wire harness. This side is made to be compatible with the Maytech flight controller, and we'll just go ahead and plug that in there so we can't get anything wrong. And then the other side is just bare pins, and all we have to do is insert those pins into a housing to build the ESC side. And fortunately, the ESC side is labeled. We can see right here the labels for them, so we don't even have to like look in the manual to look up the wiring. It's right there. Unfortunately, the flight controller side is not labeled, so we will have to look up a wiring diagram. And where are we going to get the 10-pin JST plug? These are JST SH 1.0 is the type of plug this is. We need a 10-pin one for the ESC, but it looks like this comes with 8-pin, which is what the Maytech has. So those are not really going to be any use to us, although I will happily put them in my nice, neat organizational tray. Oh, yeah, you don't go there. What are you doing over there? You don't go there, my friend. No, no, no. As usual, we can refer back to my good friend Amazon, where I have bought these pre-crimped SH 1.0 cables. Now, in this case, we don't need the cables because the flight controller came with them, and these would be kind of long anyway, but also we have housings. And I'll just take these spare 8-pin housings. They are 8. Let's just double check. Take these spare 8-pin housings, and we will just drop them in there because they're good as new, and we will get out a 10-pin housing. So in this case, there's no confusion about which side of the plug is which because we've got the red wire pre-installed and we can work from the red wire on the wiring diagram across. And it's really easy when you're building a wiring harness like this to accidentally build it backwards because you started from the wrong end of the plug. The other thing I'm going to do to try to avoid that mistake, hold on, let me get my helping hands. I'll make this easier with the camera. The other thing I'm going to do to make this easier is I'm going to take my ESC and I'm going to loosely insert the empty housing into the ESC. One thing this is going to do is it's going to confirm for me that I have the right size housing. I haven't accidentally grabbed the wrong size. And the other thing it's going to do is it's going to make it easier for me to insert these wires correctly. So looking at the wiring diagram here, you can see that the red wire is VBAT. That's to be expected. And looking at the ESC, we have NC, ground, and BAT. BAT is the third one. That is the same as battery voltage or VBAT. So we're going to go ahead and insert this. Now it's not wanting to go in. I believe I have this inserted too far. I'm just going to back that out slightly. Yeah, I just want it barely stuck in there. If I have it correct, I can just slide these dudes in. Okay, maybe not. It doesn't want to go. Why doesn't it want to go? At least I'm very confident I got it in the right hole. Next, we'll take the black wire, which the Maytech diagram says is ground, as expected. And we'll put that into the second position, which is ground. Well, this housing is a little bit more reluctant to take the wires than others I've worked with. But here's the thing. Now that we've got these two correct, we can just work our way down. Current, ground, 5 volts, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can just work our way down the plug. There's no chance of me accidentally putting a wire in the wrong place in the plug. So the next one is current sense, and on my Maytech, that is the yellow wire is current. Current refers to the current sense function. So the flight controller needs to know how many amps and milliamp hours the motors are pulling. It's very important for mostly for knowing how much longer you can fly. Battery voltage is useful for knowing when your battery is empty. So battery voltage would be like if you had a car where the gas gauge didn't work, but when the fuel got low, bing, you got a light on the dash that said, hey, you're low. But like if that was the case, you wouldn't know whether you were at half a tank or 3/4 of a tank. You would just know, hey, I need to stop and pull over right now. And that's okay as long as you're near a gas station. So flying with just voltage to tell you when your battery's empty is okay as long as soon as you get to 3.5 or 3.4 volts, you just come in and land and you change your battery. But if you're doing long range stuff or stuff where it's anywhere you can't just come land and change your battery, you need to know how much longer you can fly, and only a current sensor can give you that information. So the ESC senses the current flowing from the battery to the motors and reports that to the flight controller via the yellow current sense wire. The blue wire is labeled as RX8 on the wiring diagram. That is for telemetry. Telemetry is a function whereby the ESC can send motor RPM, temperature, battery voltage to the flight controller. And here's the thing. Most of that stuff gets to the flight controller some other way. So most of the time you don't need to use ESC telemetry. Now, if the ESC supported it and the flight controller supported it, I would plug the wire in. But in this case, if we look at this ESC, there is no telemetry wire. There's current, but there's no tele or T or RX8 or anything like that. In fact, this ESC doesn't support telemetry. So we're just going to leave this blue wire alone and we'll get rid of it later. And then the motors go 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the ESC, the motors go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll work from the end of the plug back just to make sure I don't screw this up. So like from this end of the plug to the right, it'll go 4, 3, 2, 1. The ESC has 4 motor wires, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the flight controller has 4 motor wires, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in an ideal world, 1 would go to 1, 2 would go to 2, and so on. But it's easy to mess that up because they're usually the same color, and sometimes you just accidentally get one out of order. If you're using Betaflight, that doesn't matter. There is a way in software to make the motor, to reorder the motors. It's very, very easy. So when I'm building a Betaflight quadcopter, I don't even bother. I mean, I try to get it right, but I don't stress about it. I just make sure motors 1, 2, and 3, 4 are in the motor inputs, but if the numbers don't match, it's okay. If you're building an iNav or RG Pilot flight quadcopter, then you probably want to get them right because there's not a simple way to remap them on those flight controllers. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this blue wire, and we're going to do that by just getting a knife up underneath and pull that wire out. You can cut it off, but this is neater. And then I'll just push that tab back down so it's nice and neat and out of the way. And that is our completed housing. And then I will go ahead and plug that into the ESC just so it's there. Whenever you're plugging into a JST plug like this, if you can, back it with your thumb or something so that you're not pressing against the housing itself. Sometimes they're not as secure on the board as you would like them to be, and they pop off. So just give it a little back with your thumb and shove that sucker in. Oh, crap. We got to solder the XT60 onto this ESC. If you are bad at soldering or you don't know how to solder, bite the bullet and you learn. There's really no way to be in this hobby without knowing how to solder. I've got a soldering tutorial. If somehow you haven't seen it, I'll link it in the video description below. Highly recommend you check it out. Even if you know a thing or two about soldering, I think there's probably some tips you could pick up. I am not going to turn this into a soldering tutorial. I am just going to solder this up. That's why we don't solder over the ESC. Just blobs like that will fall on the ESC and it'll be ruined. Ruined, I tell you. I'm a big advocate for making ergonomics work for you when you're soldering. If it would be easier on your arms to turn it sideways or whatever, just do it. Just do it. Do it however you need it to be. I got to put this cap on. I almost forget. I always forget to put the cap on before I solder it. And one last check. Oh, it's still hot. The prongs are still hot. One last check to make sure I've got the plus and the minus correct. They're embossed right there. And we do, in fact, have it correct. Black to the minus, red to the plus. The flight controller and the ESC will mount on these long screws that come up through the bottom plate. They're called the stack screws because the flight controller and the ESC together make a stack, or the flight control stack. I'm using aftermarket 35mm screws because the ones that come with the frame, I think I like to have a little more spacing between the flight controller and the ESC if I can. And I'm going to resort to an electric tool for running these in, because they're long as heck. This DeWalt driver is the best dang tool that I ever bought. I have a video about why it's so great, but if you're just like, that's neat, I want one, I'll put a link in the video description below where you can pick one up. I love that this one has a clutch. The previous one didn't have a clutch and it didn't have right angle capability. You get a handle and this one adjusts to right angle if you want. This one has a clutch, so you're not over torquing the screws, and that's nice. I may do with the other one, but this is nice to have it if you want it. And it's strong enough to do, there's a lot of electric screwdrivers you can get. A lot of them are really small and weak. This one is not as, it's more powerful than a typical electric screwdriver that you'd see in an FPV shop, but it's not as big as like a drill, excuse me, a drill. In my experience, the ESC is a little closer to the bottom plate than I like it to be with this build. So I'm going to use these 4 little O-rings. Here, there they are, 4 little rubber O-rings. And that's going to give me just a little bit more spacing. If you want to, I highly recommend picking up this Flywoo M3 hardware toolkit, which contains a ton of M3 sized hardware, including O-rings and little gummy spacers you can use. It's got a ton of different hardware that you can use to work on a quadcopter. There's an M3 and an M2 version, and I have one of each and restock them as need be. It's great. It's got almost everything you could need to repair one of these things out in the field. Let's see. The back is this side with the square holes. The front is this side with the slits for the camera. So the XT60 will go out the back. We're going to set that sucker down on there and check the spacing. It's just a little more spacing there between that and the bottom plate. And with these longer screws, there's no reason not to. Next, we're going to put our flight controller on the stack. And I need some spacers to separate the ESC and the flight controller from each other. If they have a little more spacing, it protects the flight controller a little bit from the electrical noise and interference that the ESC makes. It can give you, sometimes that can create problems, not always. There are plenty of builds where the ESC and the flight controller are stacked close together and it works fine, but sometimes it creates issues. So on a big frame like this, I like to give it a little room to breathe. I have these 3D printed spacers that go down on the stack screws. If you didn't have those, you could use these gummies from the Flywoo toolkit and just put them down. There's a million ways you could do it. And then we will solder down the motor wires. And what I like to do is just lay them flat against the arm. And as you see, we've got too much. I just like to take them to, you know, a little bit past the motor pad. I'll mark the wire there and cut them off, and then we'll solder them down. I think I might tape these down to the arms too. Yeah, that's how I like to do it. For what it's worth, I like to angle them slightly back toward the arm as they come off the ESC. I don't know, it just makes my aesthetic brain happy. All right, we have 4 sets of motors all soldered down. Getting these bigger wires onto this ESC was a little bit tricky to not bridge the pads, but I think I got it done. And I have also just added some zip ties. I thought it would be easier to get a zip tie in there than to tape around the arm in that position. I generally prefer tape to a zip tie because the zip tie can slide up and down the arm, whereas the tape stays right where it is. The specific tape that I'm using is this fabric tape, wire harness tape, I believe it's called. And I get it off of Amazon. Again, just back that with your finger when you plug it in. We plug that in, and then the flight controller has a forward-facing arrow, which should face toward the front of the quad. At the very least, we want to make sure that the USB port is accessible. And so this is going to go around the side. We don't want it to go like that. We want wires to be neatly constrained. We don't want them hanging out and being a mess. Oh, we also need to put the gummies in the flight controller. We'll do that in a second. So what I'm going to do with the flight controller wire is I'm going to tuck it up underneath there. And yeah, that's how it's going to go. And the other thing I like to do is I just like to give it some twists to take the slack out and keep things very, very neat. I just twist it until it takes the slack out. I don't want any tension in it. I don't want any stress on it. But yeah, something like that is going to be just about perfect. Let's go ahead and put these gummies in. And notice that the gummy has a thick side and a thinner side. The thicker side goes down to make room for these connectors. When you're doing this, use a tool that's just a little bit blunt. If it's a sharp tool, it'll poke through and it'll tear the silicone. Okay, so there we go. See, I have just enough twists on this that it's starting to coil back on itself. That's enough. That's too much. We don't want that. We just want it to barely begin to coil back on itself, but not actually do it. And that keeps it completely taut. And then when this goes down, you see, it's nice and tucked up under there. It's not under any stress, but it's going to stay out of the way, and that's what we want. And it looks like these screws are going to be just the right length. Perfect. Oh, I feel like I'm cracking open a bottle of rare vintage wine. Cadix Polar Vista, baby. Boy, you don't see those anymore. Is it going to be long enough to reach? Oh, man, just barely. Maybe not quite. Oh, good. That goes. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have a longer wire for that. Shoot. This isn't in the way. This has to mount in the rear. So first, let's just see if it's long enough. It's going to mount on these holes here, like so. And that's not long enough. That cable's not long enough. That sucks. Somewhere do I have a longer cable? Just by sheer coincidence. Continuing the theme of finding things I have laying around my office, I found a 15 centimeter Cadix air unit cable, which is 3 centimeters longer than the 120 millimeter, the 12 centimeter cable that comes with this camera, and will be long enough to work. However, I have another problem I need to solve, which is that there is not enough room in the back here with the XT60 and the capacitor to fit the Vista in there. So let's figure that problem out, shall we? I'm just going to cut this heat shrink off here. If we just tilt it all up, will that work? I'm not sure what the workaround would be. The workaround would be to flip the ESC backwards and have the capacitor stick out the front. That's the right thing to do. Why didn't I do that from the beginning? Kind of hate myself right now. If I take all the arms off, I can rotate the ESC around so the XT60 comes out the front. That's the right thing to do. It pains me to say that because it's going to be tedious, but that's what I'm going to do. I'll see you in a minute. Well, it was easier than I thought. I was basically able to just slide this bottom plate out, turn it around, and slide it back in. The arm structure was held together by these screws here, so that worked really well. It is super annoying on this frame that you have to take the stack screws out to get the arms to come loose. I hate frames that do that. But this frame, I don't even know if this frame actually exists, so I can't be too mad about it. The ESC is now facing forward, and we come to the video transmitter. The next problem that I solved was installing this longer cable. I'm not going to show you how to do that. You're never going to experience a Vista. They don't exist anymore. But suffice to say, I did it. And now I'm going to solder on wires. The Vista comes with this wire header, which if the Maytech flight controller had a plug for the DJI Air unit, you could just plug in, but it doesn't. So I got to solder both sides. We got the Vista wires soldered up. We don't need these last two because they're only used if you're using the DJI controller, which we are not. And then as far as mounting it, these mounting holes are 16 millimeter in size. These are 20 millimeters, so you really can't use them anyway. Frick. Can I get the camera under there? I really want that to run under the ESC. Come on. Yeah. Really should have done that before I installed the camera, but it'll be okay. Yes, it's going to do just fine. So there's that. And then we're just going to double-sided sticky tape that down. This is alien tape. As seen on TV, this is the best double-sided tape in the world. It's very, very good. Highly recommend. This is the only double-sided tape that I trust to actually hold something on a quadcopter without additional reinforcement. No joke. I'm going to move that as far forward as I can so that the camera gets as much slack as it can. Now we need to install the flight controller. Actually, I've done this before. On the flight controller, the video transmitter goes here in the front and the receiver goes here in the rear. And that's because the camera, for a for an analog camera, the camera would go up front. Am I going to put the receiver in the rear? I think I'm going to put the receiver up front because there's not a lot of room in the back. So I think I'm actually going to mount the flight controller backwards too. We can sort all that out in software after the fact. Yeah, here is the UART where I'm going to put them. And before I solder them up, I'm going to give them some twists too, just to take the slack out. It'd be easier to do if this was a plug, because then we could twist and just plug it in, but we'll just solder it up. There we go. That is soldered to UART 4, just because that's a convenient place to mount it. I got to figure out a 3D print for mounting the antenna. I haven't really thought that through. I'm just going to leave that for now, and we're going to move on to the receiver. Oh, hey, it comes with an Immortal T. I think we're going to mount the receiver up front because there's a lot of room here, and we'll just mount the antenna under the front. It's not that big a deal. Next, we're going to solder up the TBS Crossfire receiver, and we'll connect that to the flight controller. It's a lot harder to solder because I can't put my face down there and see what I'm doing because I'm trying to film this for you guys. I need a freaking magnifier. I'm old. TX and RX. And just give these wires a twist for neatness, as you do. And they're going to go to UART 6 on the flight controller. You can see here TX, RX, 4v5, and ground. When you see that, that almost always means that's intended for a receiver. The 4v5 pad is a 5-volt pad that powers up from USB, which lets you power up the receiver by plugging in USB, so you can bind and you can set up your channels and everything without having to plug a battery in and cook your video transmitter and risk your motors spinning. So that's what that's for. We'll just cut the heat shrink they give us in half. It's more than we need. And we'll slide that up here. And we'll go ahead. I'm just going to attach the antenna. And we'll try to figure out how the antenna is going to run, where it's going to run to. Normally the antenna would mount in the back of the drone, but we're not going to do that on this one. For one thing, we don't have a long enough antenna to get from the front to the back. I mean, I guess I could run the receiver over, put it on top of the video transmitter. There's nothing wrong with that. I guess there's nothing wrong with that. There's plenty of room. A lot of times, if you have a big video transmitter, there won't be room to get the receiver back to the back on top of the video transmitter. Here's the thing though. I already flipped the flight controller around so I wouldn't have to run wires underneath and across the flight controller. So I'm kind of tempted to just stick with my original plan and mount the receiver up front. There's this right here. Perfect little place for a receiver to go. Huh, don't you think? I could just like stick it there or something. There's always the question of whether you run the UFL back across like this. It just depends on how you're mounting the receiver, but I think in this situation what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the UFL out the side like this and put the heat shrink here. Yeah, that's how I'm going to do it. And then we will pass, well, let's figure that out after we mount the receiver. Back to our good friend alien tape. That wire is a little longer than it needed to be. I think it'll be okay, but noted. Where's the antenna gonna go? Can we drop the antenna through here? Would have been better to do this before I snapped it down. Damn, yeah, I'm gonna kind of screwed myself. Will it just not fit through the hole? There we go. And then that can go, it can go on the front standoffs or maybe even here. A little bit farther back, maybe here. Yeah. So that's not going to be the absolute best for range, but it will be pretty good for durability. It'd be better if we had a diversity antenna with one antenna in the back, but it is what it is. I'm going to figure out how to mount that. I may 3D print a mount for that later. I'm not sure, but that's basically where the antenna is going to go. And now let's mount the camera. For the camera, I've got these 3D printed mounts. I still have to clean the supports off of them, but they are just perfect for this application. That is mostly a built quadcopter. I've got a few other little things to take care of. I do need to figure out the antenna mounting. I'm just going to go to the internet and search for an antenna mount for a walk snail single antenna or something that'll work. You can usually find something that is close enough to the dimensions of the rear standoffs that, especially if you print it in TPU, which you totally will, you can kind of stretch it or squeeze it and get it to work. So, then the other thing I need to do is I kind of got to figure out this XT60 here. You don't want it just dangling out the side because then you'll put a battery on it and it'll get chopped. If I were not being super lazy, I would have desoldered it and had it come out the side. I would have turned it 90 degrees so we don't have this mess of cable here, and I would have shortened it up so it was just about the right length to stick about the top plate. But I am being lazy, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I'm going to bend it back this way. Should I do it like that? That is supremely lazy. Jeez, yeah. That is supremely lazy. Nevertheless, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to try not to make too much of a mess here. Leave too much cable dangling up in there. I'm going to take it down to the very bottom of the standoff, and I'm going to cinch that down. It's a shame. My 3D printer is currently occupied printing more of these awesome tool trays. So that's basically what we've got there, and it's going to just sit on the outside and stick up, and it'll be okay. If someone else did it, I'd be like, what kind of lazy bastard did this? But since I'm doing it, it's okay. And that's a logical fallacy called special pleading. Look it up, kids. This is as far as I go in the build before I take it over to the computer and I do all the Betaflight configuration. Because if you finish the build, if you put the top on and so forth, and then you find out you wired up the receiver wrong, it's pretty annoying to have to pull the thing apart in order to get at it and resolder it. So we're going to pause here. We're going to go over to the computer and we're going to do the Betaflight configuration. Now we're going to put Betaflight on this flight controller, do all the setup things we need to do to get it ready to fly. And since this is not a beginner tutorial, in fact, it's not even something that you probably would ever follow along with directly, I'm going to skim through it and I'll make any insights or observations as I go. If you are looking for a complete beginner's guide to building, configuring your very first quadcopter, can I recommend my sub 250 gram FPV drone beginner build series. This is a series of videos that take you through every single step of building and configuring a quadcopter and getting it into the air with almost no assumptions about what you already know. A complete beginner's guide. Like, obviously, we assume you know how to, like, turn a screwdriver, but pretty much everything else, as much as we can, we made it as easy as possible for you to get through. There's a link to that playlist in the video description below if you're interested in checking that out. I think it's the best way to build your first drone. Or if you've maybe built a couple, but you kind of want to see how, like, a professional does it. When I'm not being lazy. In that series, I'm not lazy. I do everything as right as I can because I know people are watching. And the first thing we got to do is flash Betaflight to the flight controller, even if it might already have Betaflight on it from the factory. I like to know what version's on there. I'd always flash it fresh. We're going to plug in USB, and a lot of times, the very first time you flash a flight controller, the bootloader mode doesn't work. So I'm just going to go ahead and save myself the hassle. I'm going to hold down the bootloader button and plug in USB. And then I see, yes, I see DFU up here. That means we're ready to flash. We're going to go to the firmware flasher tab, and the board is the Maytech H743. I know that. I just know that. I'm going to flash Betaflight 451. It's not the latest, but 452. There's a bug in 452 with smart audio. Well, we're not using smart audio. I'm going to flash 451 just because that's what I want to do. So we're going to select 451, and then we will hit load firmware and flash firmware. All right, the programming is successful. Let's see, we'll connect and we'll go through the setup. First, we're going to calibrate the accelerometer. It's not quite perfectly flat on the desk, but it's close enough. Then I like to go to the receiver tab and get the receiver working. We're going to need a Crossfire radio. Here is my trusty Tango 2, and we will bind Tango 2. Going to need gracious sake. Going to need a pokey device here to get at the bind button. Underneath here. And binding, and progress. Come on. There we go. Update the firmware on the Nano RX, and then it'll be bound. Well, while that's happening, let's, how about the motors? Well, we set up the motors. I'll just grab my battery, and I'm not going to use a smoke stopper. I've already smoke stopped this. I'm not going to use a smoke stopper because when you spin the motors, it can pull enough current that it trips the smoke stopper. We'll plug in here, and let's see. I want motors out. I want D-shot. I want bidirectional D-shot. Yes, and we will save and reboot. We'll go to the, let's see, motors tab, and then we will reorder the motors just to be sure that we have them pinned out correctly. This is the part where if you got the motor wires in the wrong order by accident, you can still fix it in Betaflight. Okay. Oh, yeah. And because I mounted the ESC backward, you see, it should normally be the back right motor spinning, but here we've got the front left. So it's a good thing I did this. Even though I pinned out the wiring correctly, I turned the ESC and the flight controller around. So, haha, always do this step. You just never know. Doesn't take that long, and it's cheap insurance for a problem. Hello. Where did this come from? I might not have tightened down all my screws. Oh, I bet that got stuck in the magnets of the motor. No, I bet they're tight. It just got stuck in the magnets. Oh, I can tell from the buzzing of my speakers that the Crossfire is bound and connected. Great. I'll finish up the motors though. The next thing I'm going to do is I'll go to the motors tab and we'll check the motor direction. Make sure they're spinning the right direction. And I like to do that with the wizard the first time through. So the motors will begin spinning. And we'll just check their direction. Good thing I have props off. Jeez. It can be a little hard to tell which way the motors are pulling just by feeling them from the side. These motors are pulling pretty hard. It's pretty easy to tell. But on smaller motors, it's not always so easy. So if you just come from the top, you can kind of feel which way it's pushing your finger around and tell easier which way the motors are spinning. And so now I'm just going to check. This motor is spinning clockwise. Let me zoom out. So this motor is spinning clockwise. It's supposed to be counterclockwise, so I'll reverse it. This one is correct. That one is correct. And this one is incorrect. There we go. And now they're all spinning the right direction. Let's go check out our receiver. We'll go to the ports tab. We have our receiver on UART 6. That's the default. We'll go to the receiver tab Do we have movement from the receiver? Yes, we do. Are my endpoints correct? 1,000, 2,000, 1,000, 2,000, 1,000, 2,000, all correct. And my channel mapping is correct. Throttle, yaw, roll, pitch, all correct. Good to go on that. We'll set up my aux modes. All right, we got our basic aux mode set up. That should be enough to get us in the air. Arm, angle mode. In case I lose video, I can just climb out and flip crash. I hope I don't have to flip crash a 10-inch. 10-inch props are not that durable, but well, you never know. Then for the OSD, the first thing I'm going to do is go to the presets tab, and I'm going to find the OSD for FPV WTF, DJI O3, Avatar HD. That will work fine for the Vista as long as you're using the Vista with the Integra G3 or the G3. And we are on UART 4, and we will pick and save and reboot. And then we have to actually set up the OSD, and we're going to do that the shortcut way. I have a paste bin, and there it is. Walksnail and DJI HD OSD with GPS. We'll just copy that, and we'll go to the CLI, and we'll paste that in. We'll check in the OSD tab that has worked, and I already bound these off camera, so you don't get to see that part. There is no GPS on this bird, so we don't need the GPS stuff. There's always little things. Oh yeah, maximum arm angle. We'll turn that off always. We'll turn on the motor beeper. You never know, you might need it. Oh, we got to fix the alignment of the flight controller. That's right. Flight controller is installed facing backwards, so we got to fix that. If we look right here, you can see that if I tilt the drone forwards, the 3D model tilts backwards. It's reversed. So what we need to do is we'll go to configuration, and we will put in 180 degrees yaw rotation, and that will fix that. And now, yes, all correct. We'll load the 533 rates. So then if I plug in, I should be able to arm. Turtle mode? Yes. Okay, now I'll finish buttoning it up and take it outside for a test hover. Sweet.